Oh, hello. Are we live?
We're good.
Oh, great. Welcome. This is Windows PowerShell for beginners. There's been some confusion of the room, so if you thought you were here for an office talk, you're not going to be happy. That's over in Helsinki. This is PowerShell for beginners. I'm Jeffrey Snover, and I thought I'd start by telling a little bit of my story and tell you about how we got to here and why you should be sitting here in the seats you are today. So I joined Microsoft in 1999, where I was the architect for all the management technologies and products. A couple years into that, I had this idea for this new way to do command line shell and scripting language. And I said, man, this is a great idea. We got to go do it. And they said, you know, it's not very important. We don't think that's very interesting. I said, no, it's really important. And they didn't agree with me. So I got to pursue this, but what ended up happening was I ended up having to take a demotion to go work on this. They said, hey, and it can't afford an expensive guy like you working on something like this, so the way we fixed it was we made me less expensive. But I knew this was important technology. So then, 5 years later, we shipped it. And people looked at this and said, wow, this is pretty cool stuff. We're going to give you back that, back to where you started. And then a couple years later, we shipped version 2, and they looked at this and they said, wow, this is really transformative. This is incredible. And they made me distinguished engineer. And then a couple weeks ago, they looked again and they said, wow, this stuff is a core to the server business. This is core to everything that we're doing and everything that we're going to do. And I was recently made the lead architect for Windows Server. So why are you here today? Windows PowerShell is going to become, or is, one of the core IT skills that you have to have managing Windows. If you are not cognizant and competent in using PowerShell as an IT pro, you are going to be well behind the curve. So I welcome you all here today to learn this. With me today, one of the great things is in PowerShell, it's such a great and fun concept. We're able to recruit fantastic talent like superstar Lee Holmes here. Lee is a senior, well, I guess a senior software developer on the project, has come up with lots of the great features in Windows PowerShell that you enjoy today. Now first, I want to be clear about the scope of the project. So this is PowerShell for beginners. So how many of you have not used PowerShell at all? Good. Okay. Now, if you have used PowerShell, you may or may not find find this an interesting talk. This is a PowerShell for beginners. Often we do a whirlwind tour of things and just kind of people walk away kind of confused but interested. Here we're going to slow things down and drill into a number of topics in depth. Okay? So we're going to introduce PowerShell and really focus in on the skills to learn PowerShell. There was recently a study that measured advanced Unix admins versus beginner Unix admins. And they gave them a written test. And it turned out there was not that big of a difference in the performance between a beginner Unix admin and an advanced user admin on a written test. Then they put those same people in front of a computer and gave them a test. And the difference in performance was huge. And the difference was that advanced Unix admins knew a skill set. They knew how to learn, how to pick things up quickly and adopt things, whereas the beginners didn't. So that's what we're going to focus in on today. Not to give you this feature or that feature, but to teach you the key skill sets so you can be confronted with a novel situation and you know what to do. How to discover, how to figure it out, and therefore you never need to be concerned about a novel situation. You know what to do. Okay? And then we'll drill into some of the utility commandlets. These are commandlets that can be used across all the aspects of PowerShell. So what is Windows PowerShell? Windows PowerShell is a command line scripting, a command line interface, and a scripting language. We want it to be as powerful and composable as Bash or K-Shell. How many of you have a Unix background? Okay, great, because I'll make a number of Unix references. So that helps me make sure that I'm not going to, that you'll understand what those mean. But if you took a look at those worlds, right, Bash and K-Shell, those are great tools, but when you really needed to solve something, you didn't use those tools. Instead, you needed a programmatic tool like Perl or Python or Ruby. And we said, well, why? It doesn't have to be that way. If you design it from the get-go, trying to solve both things, then one set of skills can deal with both. And that's what we've tried to do. And then again, if you take a look at those tools, you'll notice they're not very production-oriented. Now, production-oriented, I mean, they were written by people who realize that the users are their job depends on it working. Okay? So you don't have error messages like triple panic abort. All you Unix guys know what I'm talking about. Okay? It's written by people who are, focus in on people who are trying to, do production scripting. Now, why has PowerShell taken off? PowerShell has just taken off enormously. And why? Well, here's a great example. On the left here, you have what it took in Exchange 2003 in VB script to perform a particular task. And on the right is the functional equivalent in PowerShell using Exchange 2007. And so what you see is just this massive productivity gain going to PowerShell. We talked to on one of these talks, and we talked about how we had taken a customer's 751-line VB script and recoded it in 15 lines of PowerShell. And afterwards on the show floor, somebody from the audience came up to me and they said, "That's nothing." He took a 480-line VB script and changed it into a one-line PowerShell script. I said, "One line of power, what did it do?" And he said, "Well, it's quite sophisticated. What it did was it went and collected WMI inventory information across a wide number of machines, and it turned it into an HTML report." So he said, "You've got this, get WMI object that works across tons of machines, and I piped it into convert to HTML, and I got my HTML report in one line of PowerShell." He says, "Your HTML sucks." He says, "But mine did too, so with one line, that was a good deal." And you'll see we've made our HTML a lot better. So it's all about productivity. Okay, so first I'm going to give you a whirlwind tour. Lots of talk, blah, blah, blah. Let's see it. Let's see why this stuff is so exciting. Okay. So by the way, what I'm going to do here is I'm just using the machine that came. Right? I came with my laptop just in case, and I thought, no, let's just use the presenter's machine. With Windows PowerShell, it's in all versions of Windows 7, on by default. It's in all the server SKUs. It's on by default in most of those server SKUs, and it's except for Server Core where it's an optional install. So basically, it's everywhere. I knew it was going to be on this machine. Additionally, if you want to, you can download it to all machines XP and above. So whatever machine you have, you'll be able to run PowerShell on it. So here is the command line shell. Behold its Zen-like simplicity. It's beautiful. And it's a traditional shell, right? So you can do things like, run calculator and run notepad and, notepad and hit F7 to bring up things like that. Yeah, so it's a command line shell, okay? But we have this new thing, we call them commandlets. And these commandlets are things like, well, get history. That gives me the history, same as F7. But now, notice there's this verb-noun model here. Okay, well, let's explore that some more. Imagine I wanted to get the process whose name is LSASS. Oh, that's neat. So you think about what you want, you type it, and you get it. So these things are called commandlets. Now, the great thing about commandlets is they rock. I mean, they are the heart of PowerShell. So with commandlets, you don't need to provide the full parameter name, right? Verbosity is your friend when you're reading a script and trying to understand what it needs, but you only have to provide enough of the parameter to disambiguate it from other things. So too, get process, that's kind of long. We have aliases. So you can say GPS, and that works. And LSASS, if you Unix guys will recognize wildcards. I mean, wildcards in Unix are one of the most powerful things you have going, but they only work against files. Why? Why not put a wildcard there? Put a wildcard here. Okay? So GP minus name, and you have positional parameters. Okay? So you can be as verbose or as pithy as you want. Pithy when you're interactive, go, 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 go. Verbose when you're putting in a script that you're going to share with others, you're going to use on production machines, and when it's 2 o'clock in the morning and things aren't going the way you wanted them to go, you open up the script and you can read it. Right? Anybody who's been there at 2 o'clock in the morning when things aren't going well, and you open up a Perl script, ooh, that's a bad moment. That's a bad moment. Okay, so this is a great thing. Now the point of it is PowerShell is the whole great thing about it is objects. Okay, so get process. Hold on a second here. Okay. So this is get process, and notice it has this default display. What actually happens is get process emits a set of objects, and then I can say get member, and that will reflect upon those objects and tell me about the objects. And so here it's saying, look at all that stuff. But it's pretty simple. It's saying that when you ran get process, it emitted this system diagnostic process. That's a .NET object, and it has a bunch of methods and a bunch of properties. Okay, so notice you have things like handle count, max working set, peak memory size. Okay, so imagine I wanted to say, well, let's get process, and I want those where the handle count is greater than 700. Oh, that's cool, but is that right? Well, let's say I wanted to sort them by handle count. And then let's say what I want to do is to format them as a table with the process name, handle count, ID, and auto size it. Okay, so now let's think about that. I thought about what I wanted to do. I wanted to get the processes where the handle count was greater than 700. I wanted to sort them by handle count, and then wanted to format them as a table showing the process name, the handle count, and the ID. And what did I do? I thought about what I wanted, I typed it, and I got it. So that's a beautiful world. That's the world of PowerShell. Now, additionally, I mentioned this thing about production-oriented. What's that about, production-oriented? Well, with PowerShell, I mentioned wildcards, right? Wildcards are wonderful. You got to learn wildcards. They're so cool. So you can do things like get process, and I can say, ooh, I'd like to get everything that begins with a B and B through, say, R, and then ends with G through T, right? You can do things like that. I mean, it really works. Okay? Now imagine you can pipeline things. So I can go and I can say, hey, I'd like to do that, and I'd like to pipe it to stop process. And the question is, do I hit carriage return or no? Yes? No? Yes? No? I don't know. So here's the deal. I once interviewed an admin, and he described it. He said, you know, every now and again, I'm doing something, and I'm just about to hit carriage return, and I think to myself, man, if I type that wrong, it's going to be bad. You know, Muffy and Buffy are not going to go to college. I might not have a job next week. It could be bad. And I thought to myself, what a horrible world. Why do we give people a world like that? So in PowerShell, whenever you're in trouble, fear, or doubt, whenever you're uncertain, you do the following. What if? Right? Wouldn't you like that world? And it tells you what it would do, but it doesn't do it. Now imagine, well, this is close, right? That's almost right, but that's not quite right. You know, you could go and you could adjust it. You could say, well, I'm going to tweak my regular expression to get it right. Or you could say, confirm. And here we'll tell you for each one, do you want to do this one? You say, no, not that one. Do you want to do this one? No, not that one. Do you want to do this one? And you say, well, wait a second, let me take a look at that. And you can say S, suspend, and you get a prompt. And then you can look at it. Get process minus ID 37660 format list star. Go explore that thing in detail. And you look and you see, oh, what is that thing? Windows console host from the operating system. No, probably ought not to kill that one. And when you say exit, you go back to where you were. This is what I mean by production-oriented. A world where anytime you're uncertain, you can say minus what if, you can say confirm, you can explore things, a safe place to be. And here, just for safety, we're going to say no to all. Okay? So, Next, imagine I want to say, well, I want to say get process where working set is greater than 5 megabytes. Sort by working set. And voila, well, let's do 10 megabytes. Okay, and there you go. These are sorted by all the working sets that are greater than 10 megabytes. Did you notice this? 10 megabytes. Is that a little unusual? Well, let's see if that's right. PowerShell is written for the people in this room. Seriously, I thought about you, thought about what you're going to think, what you want to type, and what you want to get. Right? Notice that you didn't say, is that the right number of zeros? Anyone? How many zeros should I take off? 1, 2, 7? I don't know. I can't figure that stuff out, right? But here, 1 KB, 1 MB, 1 GB, 1 TB, 1 PB, 1 KB plus 2 MB plus 3 GB plus 4 GB plus 5 PB. Bonk.
I knew that.
Yeah. Here's the deal. If that number's wrong, let me know. I'll fire Lee. No, it's because we want you to think this way. People think that way. Okay, so it's great stuff. Okay, there's a... oh, I should do the... Okay, next. Well, hey, what about... why not just put Unix tools on here? In fact, originally we were going to do that. Originally we were going to take a bunch of Unix utilities and move them on to Windows. Didn't work. Or, didn't work. Why? Well, because in Unix, everything's a text file, right? And so when everything's a text file, your text utilities are management utilities. awk, grep, sed, they all work. But when you put awk, grep, sed on a Windows box, awk doesn't work against the registry. Sed doesn't work against Active Directory, and grep doesn't work against WMI. So those things don't really help us. Windows is a rich operating system. It's a very rich operating system. And we have these things called object stores and APIs. So how do you get at those? The answer is PowerShell. So PS drive. Here, I show you all the drives on the system. And notice I've got the C drive and the D drive, just like you normally have. But no, look here, HKLM. What's that? So just as I can say CD into C:, I can say HKLM, software, Microsoft. And when I do a dir, put your seatbelts on, this is crazy cool. I do a dir, I'm seeing the registry. I can say dir W star, A star. Right? So I've CD'd into the registry, and I'm doing things. I can CD into the certificate store. And I see, well, I guess I don't have any certs. Okay, I can see certs. Okay, so it's a very, very rich environment. Very, very rich. Okay, so that's a kind of quick introduction to the world of PowerShell. Let me tell you, there is a ton more. A ton more. You'll see that. Okay, so a lot of people, when they hear objects, they think, oh, you know, I'm an admin, don't confuse me with objects. No, no, no. Objects are your friend. Objects dramatically simplify things. For you guys with Unix, you know the deal, right? You just type PS and you see text. And when you want to get those processes whose handle count is greater than 500, what do? Well, you take the text and you parse the text. You go over 27, no wait, 28, no 29, oh darn, there's a tab there. And you cut some things and then you cast it to an integer and then what? Oh my God. So you have to become a text-based parsing expert to get things done. We call this prayer-based parsing, you know, please. And it sort of works, but it's really, once you've experienced this world, you look back and you say, why did I ever do that? So it's all about objects. Objects dramatically simplify things. Now, here's the way you want to think about objects. Object is really just a collection of parts and a description of how to use them. So in this case, we have a bicycle. It has parts and how to use it. We say parts. It's got a front wheel, it's got a back wheel, got pedals, saddle, frame. And then how to use it? Well, you want to pedal the bike, you want to steer to the left, steer to the right. So an object is just that. Think of it as that. An object is a set of parts and a way to use the thing. Okay? But in this world, what we're going to use is we're programmers, right? So we change the words around. We call them properties instead of parts, and we call them methods instead of saying how to use it. But it's essentially, it's exactly the same thing. So now, let's replace that bicycle with Windows services. Well, what are its properties? Its properties are things like display name, status, required services, and its methods are things like stop, start, pause. Okay? Very, very simple stuff. Now, in PowerShell, you deal with an object, or more often, you deal with collections of objects. And so collections of objects are fit in an array. An array is a very simple thing. It's just a collection of things. And then you want to be able to name that. You want to name either the collection, right? So here we say $process equals get processes. That refers to this entire collection. Or you might want to refer to an element of the collection. Processes of 0, that bracket there, angle bracket 0, says which one you want to talk to, and then you ask for the name. So then processes of 4, you ask the fourth thing for its name. Okay? And then PowerShell's all streaming. So what we do, we've got a little train here, just take those things and stream along. Okay, so when we did this, when we said get process where $handles a greater than 500 sort, what really happened is that was handled by a common command line parser. Why is PowerShell so wonderful? There's one parser. In Unix, there's dozens. In Windows, traditional Windows, there's just a gazillion parsers, right? So what's the way you'd specify a parameter in Windows? I don't know, it depends who wrote it. Sometimes it's a dash, sometimes it's a slash, sometimes it's nothing, sometimes the value is a colon, sometimes it's a space, sometimes blah. Here, none of that. We own the parser. There's one. You don't like it? I'll change it. There's only one. So we hand that to it, and we translate this into a set of objects, commandlets that get called, and we pass it to this PowerShell pipeline processor. We pass control to the first thing. It then emits objects, which we process and handle down the line. Does all the hard work for you. In the end, you get a really happy person. That was a leaping happy admin that doesn't pop up.
Can I show them?
Yeah, let's show them.
Cool. So we just talked a lot about the different objects, and we talked about, you saw an example that Jeffrey showed earlier when you called the get process command. On each one, he showed that there was properties and there was methods. So that's what he was just giving you an introduction to. So now let's take an example of a bit more of that. Now let's talk about a specific service. So let's say we're going to take a look at the audio service. So now we call that commandlet. You saw how that worked well. And now we're going to store it into a variable. And this way we've got a name to that service that we just checked out. So now let's take a look. This is the same service that you would have gotten if you had just called the get service commandlet. And I don't know if you noticed this, but I was able to push tab here. You probably didn't see it, but I was able to push tab here, and PowerShell will then go through your different variables. So really doing a lot of work to save you your effort when you're just working day to day. So now we talked about everything has the different properties that talk about what it does. So we can say the display name. Tab works there as well. Check it out. So this is the Windows audio service. How's it doing? It's running. That's great. Let's see what else it depends on. So, you're able to investigate in. And one thing you might notice here is that we've now got a table format. This is actually more rich detail. If we wanted to, we could go into the required services and then use that dot again, because that is a new set of objects. We could have gone in and checked out, it's an array, so we could have accessed the first element or the second element and gone into some more detail here.
It's worth pointing out at this point that what we showed you originally, when you just said service, it shows you 3 properties. In general, these objects tend to be huge. And so what we do is we show you the ones that are most commonly used, but then you can go and explore and get exactly what you want. So that's what he did here. We didn't show you the required services, but he went and asked for it, and we give it to you.
And this is an example where you get that massive, massive benefit of productivity. If a lot of what you're doing is report generation, you don't need to go through each one and then worry if you forgot when they add a new one in the future. So this is us going through everything for you. Really, really great power there. So we just talked about properties. Those are the things that have information. But then you also have actions that you can take on these things. So now we can call stop. Now, this, not surprising, stops a service. Now, did it work? We can find out here.
Nope, you want to do get service.
So here's all of our different services, and we can get back to the audio service. And now we can see that it's actually stopped. So now let's try starting it up again. So we're just being able to go through our history, start and stop things, and now we can check again. And it's running again. So now we didn't have a direct PowerShell commandlet, but by going through all of these methods and properties, we're able to get tons of power. Now what I would point out is that we actually do have commands to start and stop services because you do it so often. But there is a ton and ton of functionality packed into these objects. So now one of the things that Jeffrey had gone into a little bit is the arrays of things coming back. So all commandlets, if they return a bunch of things, actually give you an array. So let's say results equals get process. And now we can just access the first one. We can access the second one. So now all of these different things, you can still keep on accessing their properties and their handles. So I can say the ID of that first one that came back. So everything that we did in that array, what I did just here is I let you access the first one, and now you're able to access the properties as though you had just stored it away on your own. Now, one of the really common things you're going to want to deal with, especially when you're interacting with old programs or other operating systems where you do still have to deal with that difficult text-based processing, is some of the string manipulation. So we talk about, my string equals hello world. So here's that string, but now we can pipe it into get member that Jeffrey has showed you. And here's all the stuff you can do on it. So now we talked about you've got the methods and you've got the properties. So methods are actions that you can take, and properties are information. So if you take a look at the different methods, I have a string. I can take, for example, adding spaces on the left, or I can trim it. If it had extra spaces around it, I can chop those off using the trim method. So there's just an enormous amount of functionality baked in right there. So that kind of gives you a great example of working with objects. Now you might start to wonder, I've got this, I know there's tons and tons of information out there. How can I learn? How can I learn more about this stuff? And it turns out that PowerShell ships an amazing amount of documentation in the box. So in the PowerShell ISE, which is, if you're not a big fan of the blue boxes in the console windows, we've got a PowerShell ISE here. So this adds the amazing features of dynamic resizing and multiple tabs. These are all the things that people always say, hey, why is PowerShell stuck in the ancient past? I can't resize, can't have multiple tabs. We fixed that, finally. Okay.
Yeah, show them something, run something. Run a get command.
Right, so here's get process. All the information that you want, you can copy and paste. Hey, you've got the nice, you don't have to deal with that block selection that if you've had to deal with that in the console.
You know what, they can't see it in the back. Show them that cool slider. Check this out. The one there. The other way. Yes.
So here's an example of just using our font slider, and you can see everything here. So just a really great user interface that still gives you access to PowerShell. PowerShell is not that blue console. PowerShell is everything under that, and that blue console just gives you a way to access it.
Oh, show my favorite, F1.
So now here's an example of the things that we start to be able to explore. So you can read this documentation. And in addition to this documentation, this is a chum. You can search it, find all the information that you care about. And this has commandlet help for everything. So you can take, for example, some of this commandlet help. Looks like it's going to be tough to show you this one, but if you were to run this on your own machine, you'd be able to read it. Trust me, it's good information. And then, in addition on the box, there's a bunch of great getting started. There's a user's guide. So there's just an enormous amount of documentation that ships. Commandlet help. There's even a bunch of help on conceptual topics. So, you've got one specific thing you want to learn about, the get process, this is great, but you can also say a bunch of conceptual information. So all of these things are just, many bits of a book. You can read about some of our different PowerShell language stuff, or you can learn about regular expressions. Really, really great help content everywhere. So then you've got the different discovery utilities. If you like to read, perhaps the books, there's just an enormous amount of books. So you take a look searching for PowerShellers. See that number there? Probably not. Let's make sure you can. Uh-oh. You don't need to see it that bad. Anyways, there's 270 results. Any flavor of PowerShell you want is going to be there. Many languages, bunch of great resources, amazing. So you've got the books, the community, what draws a lot of people. They ask a question, they're able to go out to the community, find the answer, ask it on a forum. People they just love it so much, they feel this power that comes in, and they just want to share their information. There's tons of blogs, community forums. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's the thing about, one thing I'd really like to stress is to be successful at PowerShell, you need to be a member of the community. What's that about? That's about, boy, you're sitting there and you're stuck, just ask the community. Do a search, look for this information. It's online. There's a site here. Let's see. PowerShell.com has this Ask the Expert site. These are a set of forums that are monitored by our PowerShell MVPs, a really great group of people. You go in there, you can ask a question, and they're monitoring that. You often get questions answered very, very quickly. So lots of the different sites have communities. You want to contribute. You want to ask questions of the community. When you learn things, we ask you to contribute so other people can learn from you. And I'll tell you, look, invented this technology, a long time ago. Last year I gave a talk. I would have failed at that talk if not for superstar James O'Neill. James O'Neill wrote and then shared a set of hypervisor commandlets. And I used those commandlets to be able to put together my demos last year. Got the #1 talk of the show. Yay. But I would have failed utterly without James O'Neill. So I owe him a great debt of gratitude. And that's what community is all about.
Absolutely. Now, we had talked about, in passing, some of the great discovery utilities. So we've showed you a little bit about Get Help. Jeffrey showed you a bit more. So now let's talk about one of the things that makes PowerShell in practice such an amazing system. And the big thing is that it's self-describing. So you have PowerShell. You don't usually need to go out to outside resources to find out the things that you can do. So there's a couple commands that you're going to use on and on again. So you saw here get help. That's going to show you how to get help on a commandlet or one of these conceptual topics. Then you have get command, when you say, I'm sure there is some stuff about services here. And you don't remember, was it get something, service, process?
And notice the wildcard again.
Yep. So you just, I thought it might have service in it, and I'm going to search for a bunch of things. Turns out we return a bunch of useful things from Windows. You might have your documents. Get command works for there too. But let's say dash command type here. Commandlet. So these are all the commandlets themselves that you can access. So these are all the things that you can deal with for services. Likewise, process. And after a while, you start to say, okay, so if you noticed here, we had get, new, restart, resume. So those are the verbs. And we noticed I was able to get a service. I was able to get a process. You can start making assumptions based on these regular names about what if I want to deal with a file system ACL, like an ACL, a control list. So get ACL, that's a good guess. Turns out that it works. So there's just a really great example of using the get command commandlet. So you notice I didn't have to go to an external resource. PowerShell just described itself to you. So now I got get command. I did find out about this get process command. Now, what is some more information about it? I just want to figure out how to use it. I saw a bunch of great stuff in a demo. So let's take a look at what's the information in there. Now, PowerShell ships the equivalent of several books just in its help topics. So here's a quick, just give me to the meat. Here's a name, here's what it actually does. I've got a name. Here's the different things I can do. I can get a process by name or process by ID. Now, you might want to read in a little bit more. So you've got a bunch of great information. Online, we are able to update this a lot more often than we update the help content here. But here's where it really gets helpful. This is just the short view. Just like we gave you a default view for format list and format table, now we can see the default view of help is similar. Now here's just the meat, get help-examples. Now I take a look, and this is just, you ask somebody, how do I get a process by ID? And there's just going to be an example here, get a process by ID. So you can just copy and paste your way to success for most of the time. Now, in addition, we had showed you a little bit about get member, which is a really helpful. I had a MyString, right? We showed you get member. This is another one that you're going to get to use a lot. That you got an object that came out of a commandlet, and then you get to see the different properties of it. So we're using get help, get command, get member. Now, Jeffrey showed you a little bit about these providers, these different namespaces that are just like using PowerShell. I was able to CD around them. Which one of those can I use? So maybe was it provider or something? I can push tab completion. I just pushed tab, and that figured out which it was called. Now we have, there's a WS man drive, aliases, file systems, functions. So even more than just being able to self-describe commands, you have all these different providers, and they give you tons of information about PowerShell itself. So now I can do a directory on the variable drive. And now PowerShell is describing itself to you. What are the different variables that you have? So for any of these, I could go in and look at them. Well, it turns out there's a last exit code. This is just a great way of discovering more about the shell.
Yeah, can I show them something?
Absolutely.
I just love this because, I like to say that PowerShell is such a great product because I'm such a flawed person, right? All the things that I suck at, we went and put in the product, right? So I've got a lousy memory, right? I know that there's something about confirmation as a variable. So what you can do is you can say dir variable start, and there's something about confirm. And indeed, you have this confirm preference, right? So you can use wildcards to use your variables as a drive and use wildcards to find the name of your variables. It's crazy. And by the way, so you saw this, right? Dir variable. Right? So is that really true? Directory of variables? Here, I'll prove it to you. $z equals. And there it is. So as you set variables, you can see it through the directory. It's just crazy fun, crazy fun.
So we were showing you a bunch of information about dealing with these objects. Now, in addition to the properties and methods, there's a bunch of that stuff that you don't want to be using .NET scripting for. So we ended up packing in a bunch of great information into commandlets themselves. So you've got to take a look at all the different things. You can compare objects, iterate through them. So Jeffrey actually has a great example of getting through these.
Yeah. So by the way, one thing I want to highlight here is this notion of this ad hoc development environment, right? And what's that about? That's about just get in there, start kicking the tires, try things, ask some questions. You'll be shocked at how much fun it is. In fact, at Tech Ed New Orleans, I was on Bourbon Street, of course, and this admin comes up to me, and he says, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. This is one of my favorite stories. He says, he's been a system admin for a long time. He says, career topped out a long time ago. He says, last year his boss came to him and said, you got to learn PowerShell. And he said, no way. I'm a GUI guy. I don't want to have anything to do with that scripting stuff. His boss said, you're learning PowerShell. He says, a week later, I cannot tell you how much fun I was having. You guys have just built such a fun tool. Thank you so much. He says, and then a couple weeks ago, I go in for my annual review, And he sits down and he gives him this paper. He says, I know what it's going to say. It's going to say 1 or 2%, just like it has the last 5 years. And he gets this, thank you very much, and he gets up to go. And his boss says, stop. Read it. He said, okay. And he reads it. He says, I got a 17% raise. In this economy, I got a 17% raise. And his boss said, you know, I forget what his name was, Joe. He says, you have just been so productive since you learned PowerShell. I mean, you're doing far more than the other admins. You've just become a different guy. Thank you so much. And he says, so, you know, this has just been, you know, thank you for such a great tool. So for me, that's what it's all about, right? 1, it's fun, but then 2, you can be productive, and if you're productive, you get paid a lot more. So that's why I like this stuff. Okay, so now these object manipulation utilities. I mentioned everything's objects in PowerShell. So then when you get these objects, you want to have a simple set of utilities that you can operate against upon them. And some of these you'll see are sort of like, you know, kind of SQL-like capabilities, okay? So comparing objects, doing for each on them. You can group them. You can measure them, okay? Now here's the way I like to do this. Again, there's a set of commandlets about objects, okay? So you just know that piece of information. There's a set of commandlets about objects. How would you find out what those commandlets were? How would you know? Thomas, how would you know what those were? Get help. Get help, get help, and then what? Well, I don't know what the commandlets are, but I bet you they end with object, *object, and voila, there they are. So then you say, okay, well, great. What is this thing about group? Get, help, group, object. Tab completion. Oh, that's it. Oh, that's cool. Well, let's get some examples. Oh, by the way, here, let me show you my favorite one. Online. And here, you get to see the spinning donut. Yeah. Well, it'll show you the help online if you had a great internet connection. Or you can just ask for examples. Okay? And it shows you lots of examples. So let's pick one of those. Here, get event log.
Maybe one with the line wrap.
Oh, here we go. We'll do this one. Get child item, pipe to group to extension, minus no element. So what that said is dir, right? So dir, that's the same as get child item. Pipe to group by extension. Extension, no element. Okay, so that's not so interesting, but what we can do is, again, I'll change this to dir, because most people get that. Dir C:\Windows. System 32. This will be fun. Ooh, well, that's kind of interesting. Let's sort them by count. Oh, that's cool, but I sort of don't want all those. I want to sort of select the last 10. So any guesses as to how I would select the last 10? Maybe something like select last 10? I just love this stuff. It's so much fun. Okay, so that's the sort of stuff you can do. Think, type, get. Okay, so now, let's see. Oh, you know what? I don't have that one. Well, let's do this one. Let's do compare. Often, you do things by comparison. How does something work? Well, something's broken because it's different from something that's good. So comparing things is a very important skill set. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a get process. And here are all the processes, right? $G. Okay? Those are all the processes now. But now, I start some things. Okay? So now the world's different. And so what I can do is I can compare the world as it was before, $G, against the world as it is now. And notice these side indicators. It's saying, hey, get process, GPS, it now has two new processes, Calc and Notepad, that you didn't have before. And so then what you can do is you can say, well, that $G, let's take that and let's export it as XML to a file, let's say snapshot.xml. Okay, this takes a bit. And then what I'm going to do is, so I've taken this file, all the live objects, and I've exported it as an XML document. Perhaps a bad choice. Oh, there it came back. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to import it. Import CLI XML snapshot.xml. And do the comparison. And we have bad I/O on this machine. Oh, look at that. They're all different. Well, of course they're different. You compared live.NET objects against XML. They're not the same. But I didn't really want to do that. What I wanted to do was to say, well, geez, these things, are there any whose property is different, whose name or their ID property is different? And here you see, yeah, Calc and Notepad are over there. And then you say, well, hey, how about its working set size? And the answer, of course, is, yeah, working set changes all the time. Well, again, it's such a powerful environment. What you could do is you could say, wherever you specify a property, you can specify a script. So that's a script. That's how you specify a script. And what we'll do is, I just happen to know this because I asked in the community, there's something called math, round. And what I'll do is I'll take the working set size, and I'll divide it by, let's say, 5 megabytes, and then I'll round it. And so this is showing me, what? Oh, dot. Thank you. I missed a dot. So this is showing me those things that have changed whose working set has changed by about 5 megabytes. So this is what I mean by get in there and explore. There's so many functions that you can get in, try this, try that, and just have a blast. You can amaze your boss. All right. So again, get help star.object, star-object. These are a set of objects that you want to go explore, spend some time with, because you can do a ton of stuff. Let me do this one thing on where. Where is probably the one you want to start off with. So get process where handles greater than 600. Okay? Pipe. Oh, good Lord. It's one of those days. Where? Okay, now, literally what happens is, remember I said that squiggle brackets, that's a script. Okay, originally where we went down the SQL path. We said, hey, we'll have SQL syntax, we'll have a little SQL engine in there, and after 3 or 4 months we discovered, hey, this SQL stuff is hard. There's a reason why they got about 1,000 guys working on this stuff. And so instead we said, hey, let's abandon that approach. Here's what we'll do. What we'll do is we do this pipeline. We grab the current object. We assign it to a variable name, $underbar. We then take that script and we run it. And if it evaluates to true, we'll pass the object on. And if it evaluates to false, we won't. So you know what? Where became about 4 lines of code. And it's far more powerful than SQL. Seriously, far more powerful. Now let me prove it to you. Remember what I said. We say we take the current object in the pipeline and we pass it to $underbar, make it that name, and we evaluate that script. Notice I didn't say that the script had to use $underbar. So what's that mean? So I can say, hey, where it's true. Notice I'm not using $underbar. So I just take each object. If this evaluates to true, always does, I always pass it on. Or if I say false, it doesn't pass it on. So then you can do whatever you want. Okay, just have a party. And you can do any command you want. You can put in a little expression. You could put in a 5-page script. You can call things out in Active Directory. You can call and ask your mother what values to use. You can do anything you want. We just say, at the end of the day, it evaluates to true or false, and we pass the object on or not. Really powerful stuff.
And one minor point, too, about, you notice that Jeffrey used a script block in the where object commandlet. He used a script block in the format table commandlet. And this is one of the things that is just a really core philosophy in PowerShell, is that we don't want you to learn SQL and PowerShell script and all these different things for all these different utilities. So what we just did instead is we try to reuse the same concepts everywhere we possibly can so that you learn a bit of knowledge and you get to leverage it everywhere, everywhere, everywhere.
Yeah, we refer to this as our sacred vow. Seriously, our sacred vow. We know the people in this room, you're busy. And the last thing in the world you want to do is to go learn PowerShell. But we're asking you to learn PowerShell. And the deal is that you're going to learn this, and then the concepts and the syntax and the techniques that you use, we're going to use over and over and over and over and over again so that your investment in learning gets treated with respect, and it's going to be the best learning you ever did. For example, when the AD commandlets have this query, this filter, you can pass in an LDAP query if you want to, because often you want to cut and paste something, but also they have the ability to give you a PowerShell syntax for the query, and then they transform that into LDAP for you. Again, to try and, so that you've learned PowerShell syntax, you can use it as many places as possible.
Cool. So one of the things we were showing you is that you've got a bunch of objects, but somehow they get to your eyes as pretty text. Now, how does that work? .NET doesn't give you any sort of pretty text. And this is where we have a set of formatting utilities. So what happens ultimately inside of PowerShell, you do a command, and it generates some output. Now, if you use that output, so for example, you store it into a variable, it stays rich. It still has all the information that it originally had. So now at the last minute, you decided you're not going to use it, it's just about to get to your screen. This is where PowerShell comes in to give you, a user's view rather than a programmer's view. So we did talk about get, process, name, PowerShell. So this is a text output, and some people start to think about, well, they're coming from their Unix background, and they're going through, and they're starting to think about how to cut up the different columns. But as we showed you before, you're absolutely able to access individual ones. Now what happens is we add this for you. Same thing. As Jeffrey showed you also before, I could have picked different things. So this is all stuff that happens just at the very end. But you don't just have to deal with format table. You've got a lot of different ways of showing that your output. So I can say format table, which gives you usually a nice wide view summary. But if you want to deal with deeper information, you've got format list. Now again, you see that this is only 4 properties, and these are the ones that we thought, when you're showing a lot of processes all together, these are the ones you're going to want the most. But you can at any point decide, give me it all. I want to see everything that this thing can do. Turns out that there's a lot of information inside of a process. Look at all this data that you have. You're writing a script. You want to find anything that hasn't exited. That's a good example. Figuring out which modules this uses. So a lot of times you're running a command and you want to find out, hey, who's using this DLL or something? You want to find out which application actually is using it. This is an example of a way that you can get this detailed information. And this stuff is everywhere.
Oh, you just inspired me. Can I show them one of the cool, freaky things?
Absolutely.
So again, this is like, it's so much fun, just go explore. So let's take a look at something. Let's say get process. I'm making this stuff up, right? So I have no idea what this thing is here. I have no idea what that thing is. So let's find out. Get process, this, right? And watch this, pipe to dir. So we see that process is in fact run from program files, Realtek audio HDA, and that's the name of the file. Okay? So you can do things like get process pipe to dir, and it works. It shows you the directory of the executable that's running. So too, you can do things like, the way that actually works is minus module. It shows you all the DLLs that process is using, or minus file version info. Star, Tells you, oh, that's the HD audio controller from Realtek Semiconductor. I mean, look at this stuff. It's crazy fun. Sorry, I just had to interrupt.
Yep. So you've got all this great information. Now, sometimes you don't want the wide stuff. You don't want the list stuff.
Oh, show them wide.
Exactly. So sometimes you do get process, format wide. So this gives you a great chunky view. Maybe I want this in 4 columns. So you can really make your reports as dense as you want. Now, one of the things you might run into when you start dealing with this is format table. Okay, I did a great thing. I had some things. Now I want to sort by name. We were talking about wanting to sort by name. Sometimes you run into an error like this. So you might ask yourself, why am I getting this information? And the answer is that when PowerShell saw all of your objects, you passed it into format table, and it actually made new objects. So these things are now format information, and you can't sort formatting information with any usefulness, so you're just going to want to do the opposite way. So there's just a good example of PowerShell using objects till the very end. And then when finally this formatting information gets to your screen, that's when it finally PowerShell converts it to text.
Let's get to Thomas.
Yeah. So now you've got a good example of the way that PowerShell works. But we happen to have a special guest representing us from the PowerShell community, Thomas Lee.
Come on up, Thomas. I mentioned to you that to be successful with PowerShell, we're not done yet. We're not done yet. Hang on. You got to be a member of the community. And here we got Thomas, one of our longtime PowerShell MVPs, who's going to tell you about the community.
I remember sitting in the back of PDC 2003, and Jeff and Jim Truer stood up and started talking about what was going to become PowerShell. And I thought they were either freaking crazy or brilliant, and I wasn't sure. And 7 years on, I know the truth. And to that end, the thing that really struck me most about that event, besides the $20 bill I waved around, and you still have,
in my wallet,
I wanted to buy it. He wouldn't sell it to me. So I knew that if they did it right, we'd have this community, much like the Unix, much like the Apple community, of real fanatics who just love this stuff. We got a couple of other MVPs here in the crowd. We have a huge community of people. Now, why does that matter to you learning PowerShell? Well, I demonstrate this in my class every week. I ask some simple PowerShell question, put it on Twitter, and within 2 or 3 minutes I'll have a response. Half the time it's an accurate response, and half the time it's a response that I hadn't even thought of. So even I'm learning stuff. So why does all this matter to you? How many of you are now fully comfortable with PowerShell? Okay, so you're going to need some help when you go back, hopefully. So go out and look at the community. Now, one of the places is PowerShellCommunity.org. We've got some forums. We've got lots of resources. If any of you are interested in running a user group, we have resources out there. We can give you stuff to talk to user groups around. There might even be a little bit of money here and there for pizza for user groups. So it was a huge set of resources.
Scripts as well? We
have scripts, hundreds of scripts. And again, how many of you want to write all the scripts from scratch yourself? I got one guy, right? He's going to be doing all the scripts, and the rest of you are going to be doing what? What's that word? Leveraging. Leveraging. Please leverage. There are hundreds of scripts out there. Guys like me just spend Sunday afternoons writing these things, putting them on these sites, and we want you to use them. Please. Ask the questions. Please. And by the way, how much does this cost? Yeah, it's free. We're crazy, but we love it. So please, join the community, and when you get good and you find something out, tell the rest of us, because we'll learn too. So thanks very much, Jeffrey.
Great. Thanks, Thomas.
Thanks.
Yeah, I really just want to highlight this. You might think that having been doing this since the beginning that I'd know everything about PowerShell. And it was just a couple of weeks ago that I was like, dang, how do you do that? And I did a Twitter, hey, how do you do this? And within a couple minutes, one of the MVPs said, oh, here's how you do it. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. So, don't be embarrassed. Use the community. It's a beautiful thing. So with that, I think we do not have time for Q&A. We're done with our time. But we'll be available. Where should we be available?
We're fully staffed at the server and cloud session, so absolutely come by. Ask any questions you have. We'll all be there. And Happy to help, always.
Yeah. And have fun with this. It's a blast. Cheers.